bring everybody from the various worship service centers together here. A bit more complicated than we anticipated, but it is excellent to be together here with another session of the BMF Global Connect Forum. I'll begin with a prayer. Pray with me. Father God, it is a privilege, Father, to come together with brothers and sisters from around the world, Father, and to dream and plan and encourage each other with world evangelism, Father, with what is most important to you, to see as many saved as possible. And so, Father, we ask you to be with us in the next hours or so, and help us, Father, to hear your Spirit who lives within us, Father, and help us to really have a dream that is your dream, and to have the energy, to have the wisdom, Father, to have the love, and to have the faith to do what you want us to do. Father, we love you. We thank you. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. So this is a working session. This is a nuts and bolts session. This is a session for anybody who is involved or wants to be involved with one of the BMF sponsored schools of missions. And I want to go through a presentation, 7-8 slides that describe the thinking of the BMF Missions Foundation, which really, when it comes to this, is Yannick Lenoir, the executive director, it's Doug Arthur, who is the missions director, and then myself, I'm the chairman. We have worked on this now for many years, and we want to just talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts, the details of the School of Missions. What is important to us? And we have two goals here. We want to, first of all, explain it as clearly as we can. So at the end, we have hopefully plenty of time to have any kind of clarifying questions. So if you have questions, just write them down, and we'll have time to answer them at the end. Yannick is online, and the online crew will be able to put their questions into the chat, and then Yannick will pass them on. So let's work this together. But the BMF School of Missions, we have 12 now, and we have done this for about 10 years. And I want to begin, as soon as my clicker works. Hang on. A minute ago. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. Okay, here we go. So I want to begin with work a bit. Look at this. All right, try again. Yeah. Okay. All right, here we go. I want to begin with the end in mind. I want to begin with the success metrics. I want to then spend time on the three main elements, if you want, the three main building blocks of the School of Missions: the trainers, the students, and the environment. And then last but not the least, the curriculum, the content of what is being taught. If you begin with success metrics, I have a first set of metrics that we consider key. They are, at the end of the day, somebody says, so what is this all about? How do you know that you have been doing a good job in your School of Missions, or us together as the BMF Missions Foundation, the network of schools of missions? It must have to do with the missions impact. At at the end of the day, this is about world evangelism, right? It's about evangelism. So at the end of the day, when everything is said and done, the question is going to be about the impact in a mission field. And there, the first question is, how many graduates end up in the mission field? That's our bread and butter metric when we say, so how well did we do in the New England School of Missions? We'll ask the question, how many graduates from the New England School of Missions are ending up in Europe in the ministry, leading in the one or the other capacity in Europe? That's the number one. There's a good number of people who end up somewhere else, right? Who may end up in the US, which is great. But we say ideally if people end up in the mission field, if somebody ends up in the ministry in the US, that is excellent. That is also, it's really important to us that somebody who ends up in the ministry and is not in a mission field does not feel like a second-class citizen. When we talk about these metrics, that's when we plan, when we scheme, when we put things together, we call the schools of missions. We don't call them schools of ministry. We want to have that missions focus. When I teach in the New England School of Missions, Mike Bernard and myself, we are responsible for the academic part of the New England School of Missions. My examples are from the mission field. I say to the students, if you are going to lead a church in Berlin, Germany, this is why you have to understand your Bible. You have to read, you have to be good at apologetics. You have to be, and by the way, the Germans are a bit different than the Americans. You will have to talk a lot more about why God exists than what the Bible teaches about baptism. The hurdle in Germany is more about why would you even think about there is a God? Okay, you gotta get really good at it. You gotta really study your Bible. You gotta know your Bible well when it comes to that. That's the type of teaching that we wanna see and wanna have. Mission field versus US ministry, of course, I skipped the first part. There are graduates and dropouts. We are not worried about dropouts. We want people to feel to come into the schools of missions as also a testing place, a place to check out, is this something I want to do? I think it was one of the first meetings we had with the Bangalore leadership team of the Bangalore School of Missions. And if I remember correctly, when we asked the question, so how many graduated from the first batch? How many dropped out? They had I think they call them batches. The first batch, the first set of students, 20-something students, 2 or 3 years. And we asked, so how many drop out? And I think Dinesh, by the way, Dinesh and Caroline, I think you're online. Great to have you with us. You couldn't come. That's too bad, but it's wonderful to have you with us. And Dinesh and Caroline were kind of pioneering this together with us, the first school outside of the US. But when we asked them the question, so how many dropouts did you have? How many graduates? They were a little bit timid. I thought they kind of said, we had 50%. I think that was the number, 50% succeeded. And Douglas and my reaction, unanimous, was, that's awesome. 50% is awesome, it's great. Not because we celebrate dropouts, but we want these schools to do well in terms of attracting, inspiring people to come. That means you have to accept that people say, yes, this is not for me. It's also a good place. I think we should be good in these schools to encourage people to say, this is not for me, if you realize this is not something that the student would do. But at the end of the day, how many students end up in the mission field? That is the number one. That is the number one metric. Now, we have begun doing fundraising for the schools, and some of these brothers and sisters who have means and who want to put make legacy gifts and things like that. They come out of the corporate world. And they asked the question, they actually came up with it. They asked the other question, so what about the effectiveness in the mission field, right? And that's the Mount Everest of success metrics. If we at some point can say, look, we sent 10 missionaries from the New England School of Missions into the European mission field. And after 5 years, there are still 8 there. And by the way, those 8 churches are doing really well. All right, that's the ultimate success, man, right? That's where you can say, okay, that is successful. But that's really hard to do. You have to have, obviously, a School of Missions functioning for a while to get that information even. And that's also, by the way, the place to work closely with the Mission Society. If things work in your neck of the woods, in your part of the world, the way they do here in New England, the Mission Society, the European Mission Society sends the graduates that are coming out of the School of Missions in New England. And so the folks in the Mission Society, and some of us are wearing 2 hats, which is convenient, the folks in the Mission Society know best how well our graduates are doing in Milan or in Berlin or wherever they may be, right? So that's where that connection happens. There are other metrics. There are 2 sets of metrics that are important. The second set of metrics I call quality, and I call them developmental metrics. They're metrics that you want to use as you build the school. Those are, and you'll see in a moment why I'm making the distinction. For example, when we look at the students, you say we have 25 students. One of the questions is, so how gifted are they? Do you have a way to assess their giftedness? Do you have a way to assess their spirituality? Again, in Bangalore, I remember in the early rounds when Dinesh and Caroline talked about that some of the students, they were gifted, but they were just not spiritual. They were just not doing well. This is a good metric for you internally to use in your school, to just ask the question, are these really brothers and sisters who have the makeup to be great leaders? Right? You can teach character to a degree, and we are all transforming all the time. But at the end of the day, you want to ask the question: is she a spiritual person? And you also have to ask the question: is he really having the giftedness to end up in the ministry? A similar topic has to do with the trainers. This is also where I think we sometimes get into touchy-feely situations, right? Because people say, I can train students. I haven't seen an evangelist or women's ministry leader who would say, I don't know how to do that. In most cases, you become a ministry leader and you work in the ministry, and part of that, it means you raise up leaders one way or the other. But there are clearly people who have more experience with that than others. There are clearly people who are trainers by their makeup. Being a trainer, it's different than, no offense, than being just an evangelist. There's nothing wrong being an evangelist and not being able to train on a larger scale. And this is the important thing. You can walk with somebody, you can train somebody by walking with him, but it's a different matter if you raise up one leader after another, or you sit there in front of 20 young interns and you train them. So we are asking the question, and we want you as being builders of these schools of missions to ask the question, do we have the trainer skill in our school? Do we have the trainer skill to raise up evangelists? That's, if you apply for a grant, you know that's one of the questions. That's maybe the #1 question we are asking. If there is a school with a good trainer who has a track record, a good trainer has a track record of having trained a significant number of people. That's That's one of the main questions. Now, we began to talk about teachers. The focus on the academic director, it was there for a while now, and it's not completely new, but we want to reinvigorate, we want to emphasize the role of that academic director. We want to grow the importance of that role because we think the teaching side is essential. And this, we are talking about raising up church leaders for the future. A church leader in the future gotta have a clear understanding of what a mature leadership group in a church looks like. We expect our interns, our graduates, our missionaries from the School of Missions to have a clear understanding of the role of elders. We also want them to have a clear understanding of teachers. And the connection to the teacher is often more important because it has to do with the question of how do I interpret my Bible? How well do I deal with wrong doctrines, with unsound doctrines? That is becoming more and more an issue, and we want there be from the beginning in the training program a competent teacher, and as we have called it, a church-focused and community-committed teacher. We talked about that on Friday night, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it here, but this message, this discussion here is not just for the directors of the schools, it's for the academic directors, as we call them, as well. And then there is a third set of metrics which has to do with the cost. And that's really for schools that have been around for a while. We are not asking that in the beginning. We're not asking the cost question, but at some point, you especially as the director of the school, you want to start thinking about sustainability. The BMF Missions Foundation is committed to support schools that do well as long as possible. We actually did have an original plan where we said, let's support the schools for 3, 4, 5 years and get them to a place where they will be self-sustainable financially. That was unrealistic, and we have given that idea up. However, again, from a long-term sustainability issue, you want to consider your cost. You want to be able to answer the question, what does it cost to train a student through the course of a graduation program? There are clearly differences in geographies. It's a lot cheaper to train a student in India right now than in New England, but it's good to have these numbers. And Yannick is actually collecting these numbers. Yannick is putting things together. I just want to also say, we're not talking about the phase of grant management. We're not talking about the phase of discussing if your school should get a grant or not. We have passed that stage, right? So the audience here is of people who have successfully made the case, we can do this. We are not, right? We are not debating here, do you have the means to do a school or not? This is a working session with people who have established themselves as part of what we do here, right? So, which is a little bit a different attitude. I really like what Mike Tolliver said yesterday when he said, and I think it was in response to a student question. He said, when we come together, we should get rid of our egos. We should be honest with one another. We don't have to prove to one another how good we are and what we can do. There's a place for good news sharing. But when we come together, let's be honest. Why is that? Because we can sharpen each other if we are honest. And we don't need to present ourselves perfectly. We want to know about the problems. We want to know about the challenges, right? And so, anyway, when it comes to these metrics, you got to be honest with yourself. And we want us to have honest conversations with one another. Okay, we want to have the cost per student. We want to have cost per graduate. Also be great at some point to get cost per missionary. Why is this important? If we really do what we claim we want to do, we want to work build a program that supports world evangelism, then we are into this for the long haul. I hope that these schools of missions will be around long time after I'm gone, and long time. I hope they go on until Jesus comes back, right? And I don't know when that is. Obviously, you don't know either. So the longer, the better. If we want to do this, we are talking about helping to plant hundreds of new churches, maybe thousands of new churches. We are talking about a scale that is different. That means let's do this fundamental stuff really, really well. All right. Let's just jump in and talk for a moment about the trainers. There is what we call the mission school director. We have one person who is responsible for the School of Missions, right? We have a mission school director. We want that person to be somebody who has the experience of a trainer. We want that person to have the focus and the time for the School of Missions. We have a big strength in our fellowship, which is also a liability. We have a tremendous spirit of volunteerism. We have a tremendous spirit of people saying, yep, I can do it. I have a full-time job that makes me work 60 hours per week, but I'm going to do it. I'm coming to your church. I'm helping you. I'm doing conflict resolution. I'm going to train. I'm going to help, and I'm doing it extra at no cost. That is an awesome attitude to have, and we shouldn't get rid of that. However, that also is a liability because, you know, we Americans, I grew up in Germany, but I'm American. We Americans say, you get what you pay for. There's a deep truth in that statement. At the end of the day, if you don't have the time and if you don't have the energy to train young leaders, the quality will be lacking. And one of the discussions we have with you and your School of Missions is, what are you using the funds for? It's not that we worry that you're not using it well. We are concerned that you're using it for what is most important. And in many cases, the funds or part of the funds is used to help the trainers have the time, the focus, and the energy. We are concerned about the trainers being really well connected. Right? Yannick, I think he coined a phrase when in our mission statement of a network of schools of missions. We want this to be a network. We want this to be a connection. We want to learn from one another. We also want this spirit that we had in our movement, that our movement is known for. Is we are doing this together. This is a dream that we all share. This is a dream that we have together. I care about what's going on in South America, living in New England. I care about what's going on in China. When it comes to this, when it comes to evangelization, right? We want to come together. We want to learn from one another. To me, the last 2 days were utterly inspiring. I take away so much new energy and ideas and inspiration and excitement. I'm also more aware of the magnitude of what we are going to do. I decided to pray way more about the work of the schools of missions. I want to pray for each of the schools of missions. This is a spiritual warfare, and we are together in it. And Satan is the same in China as he is in New England, right? And the Holy Spirit is the same in China as is in New England. So the connections and to be together, it's not just a nice to have. It's not just, it's essential. Okay, and then how are you connected in your support network, in your support, in your direct support? The schools of missions typically are hosted in one big church. And when I say typically, we have made some arrangements for situations where that is, for whatever reason, not ideal. But the ideal is that there is a school of mission sitting in a large church benefiting from the support environment of that church, right? I mean, if you train young leaders, they have to do ministry somewhere. And if you see them
in their ministry, or if it's easy for you to see them in their ministry day after day after day, you will be more effective as a trainer. We also want you as directors of schools of missions, as academic directors, come to the BMF and use the support of the BMF. The BMF has changed over the last years. We began as a pure grant-making organization, where we basically said, all we do is figuring out how much money to give to whom. The grant-making system was the first piece we put in place, and that went on for a little bit. And then we realized we can actually provide more than that. We can build an infrastructure within the BMF that allows the schools of missions to tap into those resources and benefit from it. And we will continue to invest in it. We have invested in the last 2-3 years more than ever before in our internal infrastructure, having people who have time and are dedicated and so on. And the beauty of the BMF is we have the financial means. We also have the access to the brothers and sisters who have the talent and the excitement, the desire to do this. So, but that also means if you work if you're building a school of missions, if you are putting a school of missions together, don't be shy to come back to the BMF, connect to the BMF, use the BMF resources, use the ideas, the new ideas, Chance of a Lifetime, Global Connect, be part of those, participate in it, and help us to build these pieces well. Very similar thoughts about the academic director, very, very similar. Same issues at the end of the day. And again, we are fully aware of the fact that we have not emphasized that so far. But if you want, that's one of the new things of the weekend. Academic directors, church building teachers, that's important, okay? I'll leave it with that for today. Let's spend a few moments on students. Students, there is the question of recruiting, finding students, right? And the first question is, what's the pool? How big is the pool? How big is the pool of students to which you can go and recruit people from? That's a huge issue. That is, probably for most schools of missions, one of the biggest concern. And by the way, that is the place where, if you are part of a church that has a campus, where your campus typically drives your pool. In Boston, the New England School of Missions, when our campus in Boston, in New England, when the campuses do well, we have a bigger number of excellent interns in the school. And we had years where the campuses did not so well, and you could see with a little bit of a delay, but you could see in the School of Missions, suddenly we have only 15 people, 12, right? You see that. So as a director of that School of Missions, you have to think about that pool. You have to think about the food chain, if you want, at the beginning of the food chain on the campuses. If we don't have young people in our churches, we don't need schools of missions. We don't have trainees. Yeah. We had one situation where actually the trainees in the School of Missions were in their early 40s, late 30s, and we said, hey, what is that? It's great that we have them, but they are getting a bit old right there. And the explanation was, yeah, we know, we have our work cut out. We need to build our campuses so that we can enrich the pool with younger people. And that was, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, and it has changed since then. So those are right. We are planning this. We are feeding this. The pool is huge. The pool is your pool growing? Is it shrinking? Right? It's very simple. Is the pool that is available for the New England School of Missions, is it growing or shrinking? That's a conversation I have with Kevin, and that is with Kevin Miller, lead evangelist of the Boston Church. Is it growing, shrinking? How is our campus doing? Why am I worried about that? Well, I'm worried about that for the health of the church in Boston. But I'm even more so worried about that because if we don't have a huge campus in Boston that is doing really well, our School of Missions will not do well. And then, of course, some of you guys being the school directors, have gotten really good at recruiting and selecting people. Think that through. Think about your selection process, and again, make it scalable. Again, I think it was Dinesh who came up with a really cool way of announcing. He actually announced early in the school the availability of the School of Missions throughout all of India, through all churches of India. And they had people move from churches outside of Bangalore to participate in the School of Missions. And of course, you have the issue of those churches giving up their interns for a couple of years and not knowing if they get them back and so on. So that there are complications. But how do you recruit, and then how you select? I did say we're not so much concerned about dropouts. We are concerned about having too many dropouts, because we need people who do not drop out, right? So we need to do a good job selecting people well. One of the good metrics in most churches is, are those interns paid yet? Why do I say that? If a church commits money to an intern, chances are that somebody competent has decided it's worthwhile to put my money behind that intern. That means that's probably a good intern. That's probably somebody else already having tested. That's already a tested intern. We love that idea. I think that's a great strategy to build your School of Missions with as many paid interns as possible. Not because we don't want to have new interns who are not paid, but because it helps have a high quality. All right. The second question about student, of course, is the training. Again, in the ideal world, the students are local. That's unrealistic. We have a good number of schools where that is not happening. Don't know if Mike Fontenoy is on in South Pacific, to have a school in Sydney and everybody be in Sydney. That just doesn't work. It's just such a big mission field. It's so spread out. That doesn't work. He brings the students together a few times a year. He made that work, but that poses additional issues for him that he has to wrestle with. And we are not saying local is good, spread out is bad, but what we are saying is, if you spread them out, if you have a situation like South Pacific, I think Europe is very similar. We have a School of Missions now in Europe, ESOM, very similar situation. A lot of small churches that have interns, and figuring out how to bring them together. That's an extra challenge. That's a challenge you got to think about. And of course, connected to that is the frequency. One of the questions is, what of the concerns you should have, right? We wonder, how often are the students getting trained? We are not talking about once a year, a long weekend or so. That's not training, right? That's good stuff for the churches. That's inspiring. That's church building, but that is not leadership training, right? Leadership training is ideally something that's going on consistently throughout the year. And then, of course, connected to this is how much focus, how much attention can a trainer give a student? That's the underlying question, right? A good trainer wants to be connected to a student. A good student wants to have that relationship to the trainer. Those are criteria that are really, really good. Oh, I just want to say that I'm presenting this. I'm not an expert trainer. I'm part of a team. We have an expert trainer with Kevin Miller. We have an expert trainer with Doug Arthur. We have a lot of expert trainer. I'm kind of the communicator, and I'm part of it. And I can talk to you a little bit about the teaching side, right? But I think we want to have as many people as possible who eat this stuff and know this stuff, right? And can talk about it. That's one reason I want you to hear that. Yeah, that. Okay, Yannick.
Yes, if I may suggest to add a third point there, that would be opportunities, and that's to be discussed with the church locally, but the Mission Society as well, because we don't want to be training young leaders and not have opportunities for them to work in the mission field. So there's preparation to be done on the budget and things like that for the Mission Society.
Yes, that's a great point, and that's actually coming in a moment. It's really good. Yannick knows this stuff before. Yannick has actually documented a lot of these things, and Yannick is actually putting metrics. He has metrics. He'll talk about it in a moment of where we are at this moment. We are not starting this from scratch, right? This is going on for 10 years, and we have data. But the next point is the question of the environment. It's the environment in which the schools exist, the environment in which the students learn, the environment in which the students teach. Again, ideally, it's a church that has resources. The New England School of Missions benefits greatly from the resources of the Boston Church of Christ, facilities, finances, ministries, leaders, right? The church that hosts School of Missions is the living environment in which those students are, right? And if you are a leader in that church, ideally you are plugged into the School of Missions. That's sometimes a bit of a challenge, even in Boston, that the ministry leaders, they lose, in quotes, their interns for the day of training or for whatever may happen. Okay, you gotta be integrated, right? You gotta be integrated in the church and not make it a kind of a separate thing that is on the side. Ideally, it's a church that has its own funds for training, right? The BMF should not be the only funding source of those schools of missions. That's not sustainable long term. We want the churches, especially the large churches, especially the churches that have means to really fund, co-fund, match funding for their schools of missions. By the way, the School of Missions is one of the best motivations for fundraising in your church, especially all the parents of children who have been around leadership, young leadership training. Hey, can I have you guys have a legacy fund to give to that? Can I make an extra contribution to that? It's a great place to be. We talked yesterday a little bit about the potential competition between giving. That being said, there are people who would give to a School of Missions who would not give otherwise. One of the most discouraging comments I've heard in the last 10 years, and I've heard it a few times, not a lot, but there are people who say, I don't have a place to give money. I would love to give money in the kingdom, but I don't have a place to give. I find that pathetic, but it's actually it's sad. It's very sad. It's very sad when that happens, right? That shouldn't be the case. But we have lost some of our excitement for world evangelism, and we have lost some of the inspiration for people to say, yeah, I'm going to put my money there. This is a good God. And this should be easy. It should be easy to make a case for the School of Missions. A church should be a model for the young interns, right? There should be role models in the church. Obviously, the School of Missions is not the main motivator to build them into a church, but it is something to think about. Do you have great role models? One of the big things we're learning actually, we take team leadership for granted. We have great team leadership in Boston, but we actually don't teach it. We don't teach it in the School of Missions, and then some of our interns go to places and lead churches where there is no good team leadership, and so they're suddenly lost. So we have young people coming into churches with maybe older people in a leadership group, and those leadership groups are dysfunctional. And I personally think we need to, in the New England School of Missions, add that to our curriculum. We'll come to that in a moment, but it also means you have to have functioning team leadership in the church, and you've got to have the biblical roles, right? And everything is work in progress. There's nothing wrong with being being in a church that doesn't have elders yet. There's everything wrong being in a church, not having a plan for elderships. I think something similar to the teachers, but obviously that is behind the elders. And then the church should function like a mission center. Ideally, the church itself is a mission center. It's a church with a mission team spirit. It's a growing church, right? Why do you think your interns will lead growing churches if the church in which they live is not a growing church? Chances are, no, that will not work. And I know this is a huge issue because growth is not the strength anymore that it once was. But again, maybe the School of Missions is a great inspiration for the church leadership to say, hey, let's take this higher. It's not just about us. It's not just about our own church. It's about our young people seeing a church that is growing. We talked yesterday about being connected to the Mission Society. I think that's a new piece in a puzzle, and we'll talk more about that, and we want to help with that. We want to really build connections between the School of Missions, the mission societies, and the BMF. And then what Yannick said, is there a natural progression of opportunities for graduates? That's a really important thing because you have to plan for that, right? When you have 3 or 4 graduates and they finish and you celebrate them, and at that moment you don't have a place for them to go, that's a disaster. That is horrible, right? But that really means, and again, this is also where the Mission Society plays a role, that you know what's coming and you are saying, where are they going? You think about that 2 years before they are done. I think 2 years is about as early as it needs to be. I mean, the latest, as late as it needs to be. Because as Yannick said, you need to make sure funding is there, the opportunities are there, and the like. And then a few more comments, and then I'll take questions and we can have some discussion. The curriculum, you have seen this slide before. We have the 3 pillars of training. We have academic excellence, we have hands-on training, and then the global connection, which again is a new piece that we added in the last 2 years or so. Those are the 3 global or bigger areas of training that we want to focus on. The New England School of Missions is structured around 3 areas. We have an academic program. We call it Academic Foundation. We have a program that focuses on speaking. We call it Public Presence, training the young ministers to have a great public presence, say things well that they have to say, present them well, present them with inspiration. We'll pick the best speakers for that. And then we have the ministry program, where there's the nuts and bolts ministry, how to study the Bible with people, how to help other people to study the Bible with people, and how to lead small groups and do church finances. That's also the place where I think we gotta add team leadership, right? But structure your program around those ideas. And a few more comments to the academics, the curriculum. I think you want to have a very deliberate curriculum. You want to really think about the graduation requirements. You want to think about how long, 2 years, 3 years. We reduced in the New England School of Missions. I think we began with 4, we went to 3.5, we are now at 3 years. And you have that tension of getting people through the program without losing too much time, but then training them with everything. From an academics point of view, I wish we would have another year because there are a lot of things we cannot do, but there's a tension. But that's also a great place, and we'll talk about it tomorrow with the academic directors, to share our syllabi, to share what we do, not just the content, but also the structure and how to put the structure together. Joseph Porter is sitting here. He was a student at the New England School of Missions, and then he became something like a teaching assistant or a great resource. And Joseph actually brought an idea to the New England, to the academic part of the New England School of Missions, of flipping the classroom, a very proven and established concept in adult education, where you learn at home, you watch videos, you read stuff, and then you come to class and do the homework in class. So the flipping of the classroom is from presentation to homework, presentation in class, homework at home, to presentation at home and homework in class, which dramatically changed the way we teach at NESN. But I think it's absolutely more effective. It's absolutely better. It's fantastic. But if you do that as an academic director, it completely changes how you work. You are not preparing by putting a lesson together. You're preparing by figuring out that you can answer all the questions, because now you have a lot more questions to answer because people are reading their stuff that you gave them and they read more. And so you actually, you have to know more. I find it utterly more challenging to do a flipped classroom session than directed teaching. I'm a pretty good facilitator, but the daunting part is more about the questions that are coming, where I have to say, well, let me get back to you. Right? But that's just an example. The hands-on training, it's the core of what we do, right? We just think that's one of the reasons why we don't want to send our people just to seminaries. We think the hands-on training, we still believe in that. That includes public speaking, ministry skills, spirituality and character. I really think we should not skimp, if that's a good word, with spirituality and character. I really think we should emphasize that as much as we can, because if we can make sure that our young people have that built into their DNA from the early days on, that will keep them out of trouble. And then again, the same thing, share our syllabi and make them available. And then global connection, you know, build that into a curriculum. That's an inherent tension. That's just a tension because now we are trying to align the schedules, not only worldwide with what you're doing in your school, but also content-wise, right? We have a Global Connect session coming up in the fall about unity, unity along the lines of Bible interpretation, and what do you do with unity if you have disagreements on Bible interpretation. That doesn't really fit our schedule in the New England School of Missions, so we have to adjust. We have to adjust our academic program, and Mike and I have been talking about that. So we are fully aware of the fact that when we bring these Global Connect things into the curricula, then that causes some extra work on all the schools of missions. But I would hope and suggest that it's worth that. And then again, you know, being always connected to the mission field. The Global Connect brings the mission field, especially to the American schools of missions, in a great way. I'll leave it with that. What the presentation is concerned, it's 1:50. We have half an hour for Q&A. We want, as I said in the beginning, at least any question, any comment is welcome. But two things are important to us. First of all, does it make sense? Are there any understanding questions? I ran through this and you may miss something, so feel free to ask any clarification, any clarifying questions. And then the second thing that's super important is what is missing, or what do you think are the right success metrics? What are your experiences? Help us build this, right? And this is not the BMF. The BMF is not building a school of missions. The BMF is helping the school of missions. So feed it back to us combined so that we can do better what we want to do. But you raised your hand first and quickly. Tell me your name again.
Carlos.
Carlos, that's right.
I was wondering, so you mentioned that the national progression opportunity for graduates as late as 2 years, right? Sending them out as soon as in the academics, there was part of it, so the syllabus are not able to do it as long as 3 years. So does the syllabus of education continue in the field?
That's a good clarifying question. Oh, yeah, I should repeat it. So the question was, I made a comment that 2 years is the amount of time that is needed to plan where somebody should go. And Carlos' question was, so how does that fit into the curriculum? And I think I didn't mean to say that people have to go before their curriculum, before their graduation is finished, but that the director of the School of Missions, those who work with the School of Missions are sitting there and looking at the names of people and saying, you know, Katie Edelman, she's a star performer in my School of Missions, which she was. She graduated, she's a sister here. She's fantastic. She went through the School of Missions. After a year, I know she's going to do well. My example breaks down in a moment. But and I sit there and say, Katie Edelman, she would be a candidate to go and work in Munich. Munich, they are looking for somebody. Let me see if that would work out. Now, Katie Edelman, I hope she doesn't mind me using her as an example. She, at this moment, is not going to end up in Europe for right now. But that me as the director of the School of Missions, or if I'm in the Mission Society, I'm coming to the School of Missions and say, hey, what do you got? What do you got coming next year? What do you got coming the year after? That there's a plan. We are not that great at it. Don't hear me say that we are doing it perfectly well. But I think it's one of the issues that we should wrestle with. But good clarification question. Thank you. Yeah, Douglas.
I'll just make a comment from here. One thing that is probably useful to know is the B Missions Foundation is dedicated only to the training of young people. So the sending, that's where the local church or the mission society has to pick up. So that tends to require some planning. And so that's why this idea that a couple years out, you should be thinking, what happens after the training? Okay, they're going to stay in the same congregation. They're going to go somewhere. That's where we work together with the mission societies and the local church.
Did people get that? Should I repeat that? Okay, I'll just summarize it. What Douglas said is that the B Missions Foundation is focusing on training. I said yesterday in one of the presentations, the BMF or the Schools of Missions are training and the mission societies are sending. So technically those two functions are separate right now. And the point we are trying to make here is training alone without thinking, not making a connection between the two is not great. You gotta make a connection, however that may work out. That's good clarification. Yeah, Ryan.
What's the average age of being trained? What is the average age?
Douglas, you want to answer the question?
Okay.
Yeah, the question is what's the ideal age of a trainee in a School of Missions? The 42, I mentioned the age of 42 is a bit old. Hopefully not stepping on anybody's toes, but
Joseph Porter's only 41. No, that's not What we find happens is the first generation of students has older students in there because people have been waiting to be trained. And when the school when the school takes shape, then a lot of people said, please help me, send me, prepare me. And then when that group graduates, the next group tends to be in the early 20s. In the 20s is really the meat of the students.
yeah.
Thank you. We're using project cards to get in the show on the wall. Point to which is the need of COVID campus news. It's obvious that BMF has expanded its goals of being called campus ministry is going. Is there any support that the BMF can provide? Because that is, it's hard to get started. Quite often needs
Yeah.
to get in.
I'll repeat the question and I let Doug answer it. He's ready to jump on it. So Courtney is asking the question about the pool of available students. And I made the comment, you need a good campus ministry, or you need campus ministries as feeders for that pool. And so Courtney is asking the question, so is there any help for churches who don't have a campus? Does the BMF do anything for them?
The answer to the question is we're willing to work with churches. And we have resources, we have connections. We also know of people who are aspiring to do these kinds of things. I think the example in Brazil is a very clear one, which is Sao Paulo is obviously an incredibly important church and city. But it wasn't until the Hendersons went and were positioned to be able to inspire and rally the young people they were sent from San Antonio. And our hope is that next year we'll begin a program in Brazil, but that will be because a younger leader was sent there to help lead that charge. And so in our hearts, although we don't have control over what people do, we do know a lot of people, and we're eager to help facilitate the locating perhaps of a training director, if we, for example, had an academic director, which you could be. Amen.
Yeah, Mike.
Yeah, maybe talk a little bit about the relationship between, we tend to call our schools by region, South Texas, New England. I don't know about your situation, but I know it's the Midwest.
It's awesome.
Okay. This is very awesome. So maybe it's a Tom Brown school.
No.
Right. But so I'm just curious, but it does seem like most of the, so much happens in Boston or San Antonio or Atlanta or Chicago. I mean, could you talk about that, just relationships, what are going to be the other, like what do we tell the other cities to expect, because the training goes on more in San Antonio right now.
Yeah, Mike is asking the question, about the relationships, maybe in a family of churches or in a geography with regard to the School of Missions. So there's one church, one big church that has a School of Missions, and then what about the other churches? We do have some experience with that. It actually did cause some conflicts or tensions, I should say, in New England, because the question was, so what if I have students in my church, not 20, but maybe 1 or maybe 2 or maybe 3, and what do we do? Do they have an opportunity? And we actually have been deliberately going out, inviting students from other churches in our area without the temptation of saying you are going to give them up, but with saying they can train. By the way, they can train even if they are not planning to go to the mission field, because we think it will add to the buzz, it adds to the relationships, it adds to the unity in the region. But we actually had to deliberately do that. We made a deliberate decision, I don't know, 6-7 years ago to do that. And we have a board of the New England, by the way, we call it New England School of Missions. We don't call it Boston School of Missions, right? That's also deliberate. And we have a board overseeing the New England School of Missions that also includes some of the church leaders from outside churches. So really important thing to think about from a unity perspective. Good question.
I would add one clarification for the U.S. programs, and that is because of Tom Bean's vision of global evangelism, and because of our realization that the majority of our resources are financially are in the United States. When we work with the School of Missions like San Antonio, the people that we fund are ones who have expressed a desire to go overseas. And so we want to support, but we've had requests from local churches that said we would like to train our young people. And we say, that's fantastic, but we're the Missions Foundation. They need to be connected to a mission society with a dream to go global. And those are the pieces or the students that we're able to help. And so I think as we look at it in a US context, I think they have to be connected with the mission society and with the vision that we're going to go and send. Atlanta has done that. San Antonio has done that. New England has done that. And so that's really a limiting factor in some ways.
So there is some flexibility. It sounds like there's some flexibility between the students. Some are paid. In fact, I think most of ours are, but you're also encouraging even students that aren't going to be supported financially to want to be a part of it. It's bringing in, it will strengthen our area churches.
Yeah, so Mike is asking again, same topic, about the money, supported students that are not supported. We invite everybody to come, supported or not. It's good that you're asking that because money is actually sometimes the issue. We do support financially students from a BMF grant who are outside of Boston. However, when we do that, we say you need to be prepared for that student to end up in Europe. That's when we stop saying it doesn't matter. But the moment the money flows, right? Because we have to turn around. I'm wearing here two hats. We have to turn around to the BMF, and the BMF will ask us, so how many students are you supporting with those funds, and what happens with those students? And the BMF would like to hear they are at least we are planning to send them to Europe. And that has been accepted in New England. That works fine. So some of the grant money that also the New England School of Missions gets, that goes outside of the Boston church. But we make the distinction. I'm not sure if I'm clear with that, right? And for paid students, BMF paid students, they ideally end up in Europe. Let's take a question from online. Is that okay?
Yeah, there's a question from Hubert in Cameroon, and I think it's a clarifying question about the relationship between training roles and teaching roles. And the question is, are trainers typically or ideally the same people doing the teaching in school missions?
So the question, I don't know if I need to repeat it. The question is, are the trainers and the teachers the same person? The answer is in some cases, that's yes. The answer is that is the case at this moment. I'm not sure, and we'll learn as we go. I'm not sure if that's ideal. I still think I'm a teacher. I still think a teacher thinks like a teacher and an evangelist thinks like an evangelist, which doesn't mean a teacher cannot preach, which doesn't mean an evangelist cannot teach.
Right.
But I think there is a mindset that is different. I worked together with Doug and also with Kevin now for many, many years. And I think there is a mutual understanding of that, not only respect and I think there is an understanding of Valdo as a teacher thinks a bit different than I as an evangelist. We have Mike here, he functions as a teacher and evangelist. He actually has three hats. He's an elder, he's an evangelist, and a teacher. Nothing wrong with that, right? Nothing wrong with that. But at the end of the day, I think it's easier for me to focus on my teaching role if I don't have to worry about other things, especially if I don't do this full time, right? So, but that's a great question. For sure. Let's see. Are you next? Yes.
Some students that are not paid their this will come at that old
Yeah, so the question is the benefits. So the observation is there are paid students in the School of Missions, the way we describe it, and there are unpaid students. There are paid interns and unpaid interns. Again, I speak from the perspective of our school here. It is easier to work with paid students for one simple reason. You can have classes during the day, during the week. You don't have to make it weekend events. You can do it. It has become an established practice in New England that beginning in September, October, November, December, January, the semester is every other week on Tuesday. So everybody knows, and the students come together from 10 to 4, they have lunch together, they're there from 10 to 4. It's a fantastic environment, there's a buzz, there's an excitement. If I tell a non-paid student, can I come? I say to him, yeah, you can, but you gotta make sure you can join on Tuesdays from 10 to 4. And often the answer is, I can't do that because I have a job, right? So, and again, I'm not saying you have to do it that way in your School of Missions. If we wouldn't have enough paid students, or if we would really feel we need to extend it much, much more than we do right now for unpaid students, we would probably take a different approach. We would probably say, let's do it on Saturday mornings or something like that. The advantage, I want to just say that, opening it up to non-paid students, I find really, really important, and I would like for us to do better on that, because it creates opportunities for people to figure out if the ministry is something for them or not. Just a really low cost, so to speak. Nobody needs to be ashamed. Nobody feels, okay, I participated in a School of Missions. It was a great experience. I learned something that ministry is actually not for me. Okay, I go home and I'm doing it, right? So anyway. In most cases, the question is, what about part-time pay, right? Part-time pay or versus full-time pay. We have in the bond, this is a Boston church principle. We have actually Doug started it. Why don't you tell people about it? It's your program, the Peace Corps intern.
Yes. We learned from Atlanta. They barely pay theirs enough to live. Atlanta and San Antonio is the bottom of the pay scale for interns. But what we call, I didn't mean to put it out there. We will delete this from the program. Dinesh is laughing in India. The Indian interns are laughing now. Could be worse. We could be in San Antonio. No, I'm teasing. We do announce, we do have students, and we started a program and people who come in at a very low level, and we call them Peace Corps interns, because Peace Corps, when you sign up for the Peace Corps, you know it's a very low level of support. Okay? And so we do try that. I want to say there is one exception. The program in Manila, the APSUM program, when they choose someone for the school mission, they call them scholars, and they're not full-time. They all have other jobs. When we do Global Connect, they're up at 11 o'clock at night because they've already worked their job. And the ministry staff and the church leaders are always looking for these people who've completed this program completely unfunded, who are saying, here, I send me. And so they have a tremendous return in terms of people who step in. I have one small concern, not about that program, but I think they're doing a great job and there is latitude. We really want to hurry up and help people decide if the ministry is their calling or not. And if they're able to work at it full time for a period of 1 or 2 or at most 3 years, then they can decide. One of the mistakes we made in the past is some people lingered on the fringe until their 30s. And then they were going back to the back of the line with an entry-level position with 3 children, and it was very stressful for them. And so what we really want is in the early part of someone's career development to have an opportunity to explore, make a decision, and either go on and be an engineer or a nurse or whatever they were doing before, or dedicate themselves to the ministry. And being full-time compresses that decision-making window, which I think is beneficial for young people because those years are very vital to their success in life.
I think we have time for a couple of more questions. Let's do that, and then let's take one online. How about that? Oh, Michael has one. Let's take three. Okay. Why don't you start?
I've got two. So one is a very practical one. So we have a revolving computer program. As I understand it, given it's practical and training is a part of teaching people how to spend well with people. And so what happens, let's say in year two, you've got a new student coming in, but you just finished how to spend well with people. You don't want them to wait 2 years before getting into that. So how do you guys navigate it? Where you just kind of, you just keep rolling it out whenever they come in,
Yeah, it's a good curriculum question. You have people come into your School of Missions every year. The question is how you handle the curriculum if somebody comes in and missed the first, so to speak, the first class. What we do is we have designed the curriculum to be rotating. So you can enter anytime you want, and if you are there for 3 years, you're done. The problem is if somebody misses a semester, which of course sometimes happens, then that person has to wait the whole cycle to take it. We have people who have done that. We have people who dropped out. We have sisters, had a child, take a break. But then we say, well, why don't you just come back later and to graduate later? It's typically only one semester, but that's the downside of a revolving program.
The other one is the board. So we are you on the South Africa establishing a board to see, I guess, decisions, even advice on that. So, yeah, we should be there. Fix the board.
And that's a good question. We should maybe take the details offline, but I do think you want to think that through, because part of the reason is just to have. I'm sorry. The question is a board of a School of Missions. What's the composition of a board? And you want to be very thoughtful and methodical about that. We should probably take it up. That's a great question, but we probably don't have the time to do that now, if that's okay. How about Michael, and then we end up with the online question.
Yeah, I guess my question is more from an academic angle. In the world of education, there's often an expectation system for sure ongoing training, service training, to make sure that methods, content, practices are up to date. Is there a framework or support for that for the various School of Missions, or is each School of Missions sort of on their own to make sure that their teachers are up to date?
Yeah, so Mike is asking the question of the curricula in the schools being up to date, being recent, and the teachers being recent, and if there is a way, a framework that the BMF provides to do that. I understood your question correctly. That actually is the topic for tomorrow morning. That's actually exactly the point. One of the main reasons we feel the academic directors should not only be identified and responsible, but also come together and talk about that. It is a curriculum issue for also the non-academic part, but I think it's the biggest challenge for academics. And the vision that we have in a BMF is that the academic directors would form a group of experts working together, and we would share our curricula. We don't necessarily have to have the same curriculum for each school exactly, but I think that there should be, as you say, a structure or a framework that everybody plugs in. But we don't have that today. That's something we want to build. Thank you. Yeah. Oh. Okay. Any last We have time for one question, last question of the day. Are we good? Well, I'm really very grateful for all of you. We are together in this, and to me, this is one of the most important and most inspiring projects. So thank you for participating in it. For those here in Boston, we have a break now, 15 minutes at most, 10 minutes. I think that's true for the Zoom people as well. So thank you for being here.